Great, thank you, Jacob. Good evening, Mayor and Council. This is the July 22nd Charter Review meeting. Tonight, we will be covering sections 15 through 18 of the City Charter. You should have all received a packet in advance with proposed enhancements to those sections as assembled by our attorney, Cliff Shepard, and with input from city staff. And with that, I will turn it over to Mr. Shepard to walk you through the proposed modifications and receive your input.
All right, thank you, Mike. I'm going to share the screen now. Can everybody see what I've got in front of me? Okay, so it should be mirror what you were provided in a email or hard copy earlier. The first section 15, obviously this is as it reads now. The yellow obviously is the areas where we did a little work. It's fairly self-explanatory. The gender neutrality stuff is been something obviously that's been a theme for everything we've looked at. We changed the first section here, the beginning with year 2010 to beginning with the next year after adoption, which I presume at this point will be 2022, but you know, who knows. And similarly, we went through and tried to, some language, as you'll see, becomes stilted over time. What we used to think sounded good doesn't sound so good anymore. And we also learned how to use less words and say the same thing. So there was none of this that was particularly substantive or in any way affects anything except making it read better. For example, if you look at the second change there, same elective office, the only thing we did there was add a comma. Now that the great Oxford comma debate has supposedly been resolved in favor of the comma, and things of that nature. I'm trying to see if there's anything in here. Oh yeah, there was one thing that we talked about, and that is the statute that involves breaking ties. And it says we added a section: should any general election result in a tie for any office, the winner of the election shall be determined by the drawing of lots or by such other method as may be provided for in Florida statutes. Now, that is, in fact, the law in Florida. So if the charter says absolutely nothing about breaking ties, that's how a tie would be broken, even if the charter didn't say so. But why it might be valuable to put it in here is because, and I had this is one of those personal experience things. When you've been doing it a long time, I've actually experienced a tied election. I used to represent the city of Mount Dora. The two candidates for council exactly tied, and the candidate who thought it was to his advantage to have a runoff because he lived in a big neighborhood where he could get his neighbors out and nobody else would show up, and therefore he'd sweep the quote unquote runoff, was taking the position under the charter that, hey, nobody got a majority, therefore we fall into the runoff section instead of defaulting to Florida statutes for the tied section. And that was cause for some consternation, obviously, by the other candidate who said, that's not fair. It doesn't say it. Yes, nobody got a majority, but we were in the general election. It was only two candidates. You don't run off when the same two candidates are the same two candidates that come out of the general with the same numbers. That makes no sense. That's a tie. The court agreed that that's the way it should go because they actually filed a lawsuit over it. And we defaulted to the statute. They drew lots, and as fate would have it, or karma, use your choice, the candidate who was trying to jerry rig, if you will, the system in his favor, drew the short straw and did not win. I might also add that is why I am subsequently the former attorney for Mount Dora, because after that election, he got reelected, and along with a couple of other guys decided it was time for a new lawyer who would listen to what he wanted. So anyway, those are the way those things sometimes work out. But that is why here there is a specific reference in that you were suggesting, a specific reference in the charter that would tell people very clearly that if there's a tie in a general election, the winner is chosen by a drawing of lots. I'll add this to the discussion before we open it for questions, and that is that the drawing of lots, shockingly, at least to me, and I found out through the Mount Dora experience, is not a defined term that says it will be drawing straws. It could be drawing numbers out of a hat. It could be any one of a number of ways you could do it with a game of chance. It could be throwing dice. So what a drawing of lots means is open to interpretation, and that would be up to the council to determine how that was done. In the Mount Dora thing, I think they drew something out of, I think the clerk put two names in the hat and drew one of the names, and it happened to be the other candidate. But that is something that will be determined, and it's not spelled out in the statute, nor do we have to spell it out here. That will be determined by, if that ever happens, by the council at the time as to what method of lot drawing would be chosen. So with that, I have open for any questions. Ms. Golden, I see you up there, but you're on mute.
Yeah, and I guess in this format, we don't have the hands. Do we have the hands?
I don't know.
Hands, Mike or Jacob, because
it's under reactions at the bottom of the screen.
It is? Okay, all right. So now I know how to do it. So I have a question, Cliff.
Yes.
What if state statute or state law changes? You say right now it's drawing of lots, but so if we have it in our charter that it's drawing of lots or whatever is in state statute, and then say it changes and there's something else or a different option, what happens at that point? Then we, based on what's proposed.
Well, the answer is drawing lots is the current state statute, and I put in the language, or by such other method as may be provided for in Florida statutes. My thought being that they wouldn't eliminate drawing of lots, but they might provide some additional method, given the current state of the country, like, dueling pistols, throwing darts at one another, something much more civil. But the answer is to be more serious about it is I don't know how they would structure it in a way that the whole point of it is to take decision making out of the process, because when you have a tie, you're trying to get to a result. So I would hope, not guarantee, that the legislature was smart enough not to then create a new controversy by not giving you additional methods. They may change the method, but it shouldn't be additional methods. So I assume it would be that we continue to be drawing lots unless they took that out and said, we're going to draw ping pong balls or something else. I just don't know. But if you want to be real specific about it and not worry about it, the winner of the election shall be determined by such method as may be provided for in Florida statutes, and take out the drawing lots. That's fine. I'm not wedded to that language, but that just happens to be the current method.
So here's my thinking. I guess I'm concerned that we could get into a situation where there could be some conflict or issue if we've got drawing of lots and say the state statute changes, and then there's the question of, oh, well, which one is it? And then, it may become an issue at that point. And that's maybe looking way, way, way into the future, and maybe the state statute never changes. But I guess my concern would be that we would end up in a situation where we have two things to choose from, and then how do we resolve it? And then does that become a conflict? I don't know. What does anybody else think about that?
I think you might be reading too deeply into it. I mean, the idea is that it's a chance versus something that's of skill. We do have some recent experience up here where I think they flipped a coin and then drew a ping pong ball. So there was really, it was completely done by chance. So I can't imagine it not being fairly obvious whether the method is up for debate. As long as it's a game of chance, then I don't see what the issue would be.
I see Councilmember Jansen has his hand raised.
Yeah, so in reading it, I don't have any heartache a little bit to Sandy's point that if we took out the drawing of lots and just referred to the state statute. I mean, I hear what you're saying, Cliff, too, but I think if we rely on Florida state statutes, I think then it's kind of clear, you just go by the statute.
That's fine. If that's what where you all end up, the redraft would be something along these lines. Should any general election result in a tie for any office, the winner of the election shall be determined by the method provided for in Florida statutes.
Yeah, so that's what I think, but I'm just one person here, so whatever council wants to go along with.
Yeah, I agree. Because right now it's a game of chance with the state, but if the state adds something that's not a game of chance, then who would decide if it's a game of chance or not a game of chance? So just leave it up to the state. Of course, then if the state decides something that's not a game of chance, then it won't be a game of chance. Could be duels.
Yeah.
Has there been discussion at the state level of adding duels?
Pay homage to Hamilton.
See, we have Councilor Golding followed by Councilor Meza.
Yeah, I'll just add that I'm totally fine to deferring to whatever the state provides in statute. If everyone else feels comfortable with that, I would rather do that than have us end up in a situation where there could be two options, and then you've got to sort that out.
And Councilor Meza.
Yes. Wouldn't we want to have somewhat of a say-so into how we decide if there's a tie, and instead of having the state to decide? I know Neptune Beach had it, but if I don't know, I'm just thinking more of a home rule kind of thinking where, well, it's our election. Let's not get the state involved. Let's do it our way. And I don't know, that's what I don't know. I agree with what Sandy's bringing to her point, and I understand, but that's just my concern. I mean, wouldn't it be better if we handle it ourselves? I don't know. What is Mayor Hoffman thinking?
I don't really see this as state interference. I think maybe to Sandy's point, it might be better to have something to defer, from an outside perspective in terms of state statute. So I don't see this as a home rule issue or interference by the state, but just having kind of that outside source for how to handle it.
Councilor Dumont.
I'm kind of on the same line of questioning as Fernando. If the state, for some reason, shows something that was not chance, could we, if it's in our charter, say that it's done through a game of chance, drawing straws, rolling the dice, flipping a coin, whatever it is? Let's just stick with the duel. If the state says draws are going to be decided by duels, and in our charter, we don't have the state piece, we just say that will by a drawing of lots. Would we have to have a duel, or could we do lots?
No, you could do lots. You could.
All right, and the duel would be off the table, even if the state says that's how we figure out ties.
Much to my chagrin, unless they preempt us in this area, the answer is yes, because the idea of a duel would be very exciting. But your point is right. There would be this is not an area where it is preempted to have your own method for breaking ties. It is an area that is provided for in the event nothing else is provided.
Okay, so can we just a drawing of lots and drop the state?
You can do it however you want, as long as right now you have nothing. And so and you could have stayed with that. It would default to the state and whatever method the state provided. And the only reason for even bringing this up is because, as I learned through the Mount Dora experience, I think the clerk also suggested something, is it provides direction to an otherwise uneducated public or maybe uneducated candidate of how does this situation get resolved without having to call the lawyer. It's just tells you right there, go look in the statutes. But again, if it's already there, then the answer is clear, and drawing of lots is certainly fine. And again, even within that, as we've discussed, there are many different ways to draw lots. Y'all can decide that whenever the time comes, if it does come.
Yeah, if we can just leave it at drawing of lots, I'm more comfortable with that than leaving it up to the state to decide if they decide to change it and we don't like the change that they make. Games of chance, randomness is a good way to decide.
Councilor Jansen?
Yeah, just a quick question for you, Cliff. If a candidate involved in a tie wanted to defer to the state, wouldn't they have precedence over us, over our charter? Because all of our other election laws, we're going by the state rules and regulations.
Well, certain things, you're like, for example, I don't know if I can't remember because I put these, the first time we had these meetings close together. I can't remember whether this is in the next meeting or this one, but obviously I know, can see right here, we have polls opening and closing, and I think that's in accordance with state law. I think we have qualifying in accordance with state law, and there are certain aspects of state law that regarding elections that are preemptory and others that are not. For example, we decide what the qualifications are for office for our city. Some cities have a residency requirement where you have to have been a resident for X number of months or even years before you can run for office, as well as being a registered voter in the locality. Yours does not require that. It just requires that it be at the time that you're a resident of the district you file in or you file for. So those things are controllable by us. So no, a candidate can't elect to follow state law if it is in derogation of local law, unless state law is preemptive, meaning it doesn't matter what we say, state law controls. And if that were the case, we couldn't do it our way regardless. Again, for the same reason, state law would control. It just happens that breaking a tie is not one of the areas, at least yet, where we've been preempted.
Right. So, and to Councilmember Demont's point, I'm good either way. I think we just choose one instead of making it the way it's written, where there's either or. I would rather just choose one, whether it's the drawing of lots or deferring to the state. That's my opinion.
The good news, it's easy to do either way. I just need to know which way you want to go.
Do we want to do a raise of hands like we did last time, Mike?
We can do that if Cliff wants to throw out a suggestion.
Well, all right, so option one, I'll go through it with this way. Option one, which we already discussed, reads, should any general election result in a tie for any office, the winner of the election shall be determined by the method provided for in Florida statutes. That's option one. Option two would be, should any general election result in a tie for any office, the winner of the election shall be determined by the drawing of lots, period. So hands for one, hands for two. How about that? Mike, you want to be the counter?
Sure, I'll be the counter. Hands for one.
I see no hands.
We have one hand for one. Can we show
Okay.
hands for two? Hands for two it is.
Okay. So I will draft it up that way. And again, for anybody who's maybe listening or in on this and not understanding, these decisions will not be final until, or even actually decisions until we have an ordinance, a draft ordinance further down the road that includes all the proposed changes and language. And then there's a prioritization of what will be on the next ballot and so forth. So for anyone who is wondering out there, when do I get a chance to chime in and have input before a final decision is made? This isn't even a preliminary decision except what to bring back to look at as a draft. So I'm just kind of putting that out there for the record. All right, is there any other questions about any other section here, or are we ready to move to the next thing? Okay, here we go. All right, 16 is regulation of elections. This is one of those where we were changing older language. The word needful sounds more like me as a husband than it does, and I'm certainly not necessary. The council shall make all necessary rules and regulations, not inconsistent with the charter. That's with a language choice for clarity. And in addition, for reasons I don't understand, and it may be that I've missed out on something in your elections, but they made a distinction in this section between the mayor and newly elected council members shall be sworn in, and language reads like the mayor is going to be sworn in each and every election, regardless whether the mayor's office was up for election at all, which I just think that was poorly constructed. So assuming that I understand the way your elections actually work, what I said is newly elected officials. So whether you're a mayor or a council member, you will be sworn in, and it doesn't then therefore assume that every time there's a election, somehow we got to re-swear in the mayor. So that was that one. And I think I just made it consistent throughout that section. And the other one was an addition of a comma for the punctuation. So anybody have any questions about any of that? Fantastic. So do we scroll on? All right. Voting equipment. Now this is something I didn't know much about in terms of what Jack's Beach does. And so we got the only substantive suggestion here came from your clerk, acting clerk, Miss Goslin. And it was to add in a section, rules and requirements for the use of voting equipment for municipal elections shall be established by and approved through the Office of the Supervisor of Elections of Duval County. Now, as I understand it, the way your elections work is that your Duval County Supervisor of Elections is in fact the designated supervisor of elections for Jack's Beach. And so it makes sense that how the equipment is used to run your elections would be handled through that office. So this pretty much states the obvious, but it does provide information where there was a void before. And so I think that's a good enough reason to include it. And so that is why it is there. Any questions about that? I see a hand, Mr. Jansen.
When it comes to the Duval, I don't want to, I know we made a decision on the last section, but it just sparked a thought in my mind that do we look at what Duval County does in case they have a tie? Would there be a conflict of, well, it's Mike Hogan right now. If we had a tie and Duval County wanted to get involved, I hate to rehash it, but because I'm good with the way we have it, but I guess the question for you, Cliff, is could they intervene and go, well, we think it should be done like this because we're the consolidated city? No,
it's ironic. This, I'm so glad that I do other cities because it's amazing how things come back around. But this one is not even 2 or 3 weeks old. One of the cities that I currently represent is Town of Ponce Inlet, and they had 2 different issues come up in their last the election is not till August 18th. And one of them involved the use of petitions. And it's a little bit of a story, but I'll get to the point quickly. They're not unlike your charter. They have a qualifying section that uses petitions of registered voters within the town. And I think it's 15 there. I think you have 10. And they basically say, I want this person to be able to run for this office. And that's important in the context of the example I'm going to give you, because in that situation, those petitions became a hotbed issue because they were for one specific purpose, and that is to get on the ballot, not to waive qualifying fees or filing fees or any of that, but because the charter required it for them in order to, as an additional kind of step for them to be good enough to run or be designated as candidates, it was not just you have to pay a fee and show up and be a resident. You also have to have these petitions. And I think that's the way Jack's Beach works as well. Well, unfortunately, because people are human, the supervisor of elections of Volusia County saw the petitions and assumed that they were petitions being submitted to waive the qualifying fee. And the initial problem with them that she saw, which turns out to be not even a problem at all, was that those petitions were defective in that they didn't contain language about whether this was a partisan or nonpartisan candidate being running for office. It's because the form that was being used was a form for a waiving of the qualifying fee, even though the purpose of the petition had nothing to do with that. It was just to comply with the charter. So long story short, she initially notified the town that this candidate had not qualified, but we determined that she had mistaken the use of the petition for waiving a qualifying fee as opposed to simply being a requirement of the charter to qualify for election. And so at the end of the day, she can't and didn't dictate to us. She had no authority to disqualify our candidate. And the form that we supplied, even though, or that they supplied and that the candidate used, which had this extra blank for partisan, nonpartisan race, was of no moment, because all our charter required was the name of the voter who was supporting the candidate, their address, and their status as a voter in Ponce Inlet. And once she certified those things, there was nothing else for her to do, and certainly she couldn't disqualify the candidate. So long-winded way of saying, no, Duval County can't tell you what to do. They are your servant. They are not your substitute.
Interesting analogy that you gave, because I noticed in my election that the petitions were due on a certain date. I think it was in May, but they closed the opportunity to become a candidate in June. And my question was, well, and I don't know if we need to address this somewhere along the line, was if the deadline was in May and you decide you want to become a candidate in the 24th hour, do we just waive the petitions, or are you okay to bring them in the 24th hour? And if you are, then why do we have a deadline back in May?
That's the confusion she had. It's two different petitions. There is, if the supervisor said that petitions to waive the qualifying fee needed to be done in May, that would be consistent, because those petitions have to be filed and certified 28 days before qualifying begins. And if you try to bring them out, those petitions are not going to work for the purpose of waiving the qualifying fee. However, the petitions that are just used to get you on the ballot per your charter, different thing altogether, based on what your charter says. And again, I think it's in your case, it's like 10 of them, if I remember what I read. It's a whole different petition, but they're easily confused by people who don't understand that there's a whole set of rules that apply to how you waive a qualifying fee by petition and the deadlines for that, and petitions that are required nowhere else but in your charter to get you on the ballot pursuant to what your charter says.
No, yeah, I understand. Yeah, I understand what you were saying. But because we don't have one as far as the qualifying fee is concerned, we just have the 10 to get you on the ballot. What I'm saying is there's a deadline for those 10, and it's in May. And so if somebody decides in June, in the 24th hour, are they given the exception to provide the 10 qualifying petitions to get them on the ballot?
Yeah, I just want to jump in real quick. I think that was a misinterpretation by our clerk at the time, because it was not always like that. And yes, you can file to run for office at the 11th hour, and you can turn those petitions in at that time. I think she was trying to proactively make sure that they were all, registered voters and were applicable. But I maintain that she was wrong in that interpretation.
I got you.
I still got it.
I don't remember seeing a deadline. I don't remember seeing a deadline in the charter. And
it's not in the charter.
What that would have happened, what should have happened, and what had happened in our case is the candidate who initially was told he was disqualified, by process of going through the research, made sure that the council knew that he needed to be reinstated as a candidate because he had the sufficient number of petitions, They had the right information. Yes, they were turned in at the 11th hour, but there was nothing in the charter that required those petitions to be turned in sooner than that. And so he was put back on the ballot. All right, so are we good with that stuff? We got more questions? What do we want to do? We're good? Okay. All right. Section 18, officers to be elected. This was, actually, I'm wrong section. I'm trying to remember. Yeah, this is one of those where we changed gender neutrality. We added some punctuation. And I think there's nothing in here of substance. I think it's all fairly self-explanatory, but if there are questions, then please let me know.
Can you scroll back up just a little bit?
Sure.
Should we be including the mayor and the officers to be elected? We have the 3 at large and the 3 districts.
Well, is the mayor considered to be one of these seats, or is the mayor a separate seat? I thought it was a separate seat that didn't have a number.
Does not have a number.
Okay, so that's why I think that's why they're not here. If that's what your question was, I'm assuming I understood the question.
Yeah, I didn't know that it was required to even have a number. I mean, the mayor is an officer to be elected. It's just not a seat number. Am I not right there?
Well, I know that the mayor is a member of council, but is the mayor a city council person? And I'm asking because there actually is a distinction in certain cities as to how that works. I know that in this case, you're not a ceremonial mayor, so I understand that, but the mayor is like, it's got its own category. So I don't know if that's true here or not.
I think it might be left out of this section because this section is more determining how the actual council seats are divided. So maybe that's why it's not in there.
Right, 3 at large and three with a, where you represent a district, and the mayor, I guess, as essentially would be at large as well. I mean, that's how I interpreted it. I mean, you certainly could, if you wanted to, leave the language 6 groups or seats at 6 groups invited as mayor and 6 groups of seats as follows, or some language that would reference the mayor, but I didn't stumble over it, so I assumed, I kind of understood what was going on here.
Sure. Scroll down, scroll back down. I think, do we refer to the mayor in the following paragraph?
Yes.
Right. All right.
Right there.
Okay. That's the reason why it caught my attention, is because then we go ahead and talk about the mayor in the same paragraph. I don't think it really makes that big of a difference because I don't think it's that confusing, but.
It's your pleasure. If you want to make a reference somewhere up there, I'm happy to do it.
I think Georgette has her hand up.
Yes, ma'am.
Thanks. The section on page 4, the first full paragraph,
Right.
it's redundant with section 15.
Okay, let me see what you're talking about. All right, let me go back. Excuse me for scrolling in front of you like that.
It's the second time we're talking about what we do if there's
Yes. The first, if you look back at 15, it's the general election only. This one talks about what happens in the event of in a primary.
the primary in 15A is the primary.
Yeah, let me go back to that then, because I thought you were looking at the other section. Hang on.
15A is primary, 15B is general.
All right, am I missing where it says under primary that there's a runoff? Because that's what I'm trying to get to.
Okay, so it should it be in 15A or should it be in 18?
For organizational purposes, I would have no problem with moving it, but it's not redundant because it provides something that isn't in 15A, which is what happens in a primary when there is some, no candidate receives a majority to move on. And so that is the reason it's not redundant. But in terms of locating it in a different location, you could certainly move it to that other section 15A.
I'm just not sure why a runoff is for the primary is in 18, but for the general, it's talked about in 15.
I don't disagree with you, and it's an easy thing to essentially pick up and move. So if that's what the consensus is, then that can be done.
Yeah, 'cause 18 is qualification.
Yeah, I think for
Yeah.
continuity that it probably should be moved. Would make better sense.
Yeah, because here we're talking about qualifications, not the election itself. It's to even get on the ballot.
Works for me. I have made the adjustment and we'll make it sure it shows up in the last thing, unless there's any other questions or concerns about that. And Mr. Mont, your hand's still up. Is that just because you haven't?
Sorry. Nope.
It's okay. Anybody have any questions? Anything else on this section? Then are in agreement that it probably belongs better in 15A. Okay. All right. That.
Can you
Is-
clarify, I'm sorry, but can you clarify what exactly would be moving to 15?
Yeah, that paragraph. So let me, are y'all, when I move my cursor, y'all able to see that or no?
Yes.
Okay. All right. So this section here would be moved to the prior section, which is 15A. Under primary election. So we would put it either between these two or right after this one right here.
Okay,
Okay.
thank you.
And unless anybody's got any other questions, Mike, I think I have done all the damage I can do here today.
You did click, came and did the damage that you sought to do, sections 15 through 18. I don't think there's anything else that we have for tonight to these sections of the charter. I would remind council that next Monday on the 26th will be another charter review. You should have received the packet for that meeting earlier today, and that will be, I believe, sections 19 through 25 for review. And if you have any questions in advance, feel free to give me a holler. Otherwise, we'll all get back together next Monday at 5:30.